Hey everybody, my name is Eric. How you doing today? Today I'm going to talk a bit about free will. Free will is a term that gets thrown around a lot by religious people in terms of describing the gift that God gave to humanity in terms of free will. Now there are two possible definitions of free will. I'll read them for you here. This is from Webster's Dictionary, Merriam-Webster's Dictionary online. 1. Voluntary choice or decision. 2. Freedom of humans to make choices that are not determined by prior causes or by divine intervention. Now the second one is really what I want to concentrate on, because no one argues the first definition as being the intrinsic value of humanity, in that their voluntary choices or decisions are made. Obviously that is the case. But the second definition, as it applies to divine intervention, prior causes, and all of those things, is the one that I want to concentrate on the most right now. And the argument that I want to put forward is the idea of free will versus determinism. Now, determinism is something whereas every thought process, every decision-making model that everyone has is based solely on their previous experiences. Now, whether this is from environmental influences, whether it's from influences from other people, whether it's from decisions that people have made on their behalves when they were kids or otherwise. This is what determinism is. I'll delve into that a little bit in a moment, but let's start with a bit of a story. Now for the moment, let's leave God out of the equation. We're talking about the idea of causality versus free will completely. Imagine a 7-year-old girl. A 7-year-old girl one night wakes up to see her father creeping in her room. And he tells her that she needs to please him in order to make sure that she doesn't get punished. This goes on for a while. She gets physically abused, sexually abused by her father over the course of a few years. Her mother, who is completely ingrained in this abusive relationship, completely denies any wrongdoing on the part of her husband. Even when the child herself goes to her mother and says, "This is what he's done to me," in great detail, the mother still vehemently denies that this is the case. When the truth finally comes out at age 14, 7 years after the father first came into that little girl's bedroom on that one faithful night, still his family and the mother's family side with him. And they basically shun this little girl. Now, this is the kind of event, and obviously I'm using a monumental event in the child's life here, but this is the kind of event that has a huge impact on how this girl, this woman, will now see everything for the rest of her life. She will see relationships differently. She will see children differently. She will see parents differently, most notably her own, families, and so on and so forth. Everything that she chooses to do is going to be colored by these things that were not of her choosing. I mean, let's be honest here. She didn't choose to be sexually abused by her father. She didn't choose for her mother to believe her father over her. She didn't choose for her family to think that she was just lying to them. She didn't choose those things. Therefore, her free will was essentially usurped by someone else. Now, this essentially flies in the face of the idea of free will being able to make choices that are not determined by prior causes. And when you think about that, it's ridiculous to think that that is actually the case. If we could make choices without taking into consideration prior causes, we would never learn. We would keep making the same mistakes over and over again. That old story about the two goldfish swimming around the bowl and meeting halfway up and every 3 seconds saying, "Oh, hello, good day, how are you doing today?" That's what we would be, because we would essentially have no memory. If we couldn't take into account our prior experiences, our prior causes, we would not be able to do anything without repeating ourselves and repeating ourselves and repeating ourselves. Now let's put God back in the picture now. Many people will argue that God doesn't put more on our plates than He knows we can handle. That God has a plan, that everything happens for a reason. I can't imagine any possible reason why a God who would be considered omnibenevolent, in other words, all-loving, to subject a little girl through that kind of torture for 7 years and beyond, because of the psychological impacts that this has on this girl throughout the rest of her entire life. Now, I also understand that many people believe that God doesn't create situations, but simply oversees them as they happen, and that other people's free will can interact with our own. Again, I say, you can't have free will if someone else can usurp your free will. Free will is either a God-given right, or it's a on and off kind of thing. It doesn't really work. Now, at this point, we understand, I think, that with or without God, free will is something that is an illusion. Our brains make us think that free will is existent because we like to think that we're the masters of our own domains. But where do we go from here? I mean, if determinism is actually how our thought processes work and how our decision-making models are formed, where do we go from here? What does that mean for humanity? To me, this means that it allows us to better understand where our decisions come from. When we know what is causing us to make certain decisions, particularly when we're talking about bad decisions, it allows us to make changes so that we can make better decisions later on. Because as much as we are reactive creatures and we are instinctual creatures, we are also intellectual, cerebral creatures, and our intellect in our rational mind can and often does override the instinctual portion of our mind. But if we don't know about it, we can't make any changes. It's important for us to know why we make decisions the way that we do, why we decide to do things in the way that we do, because that gives us the opportunity to improve our decision-making process so that we don't make the same mistakes again, and we don't put other people through difficult things for no reason.